Porsche is a car brand that's known for the racing heritage, and they decided to bring that racing heritage to the streets when they debuted their GT cars way back in the days. And speaking of their GT cars, we've got a special one here today. That's going to be this 2023 Porsche 911 GT3 RS, and I'm talking about the 992 generation. And we're going to be talking about what makes this car so special and just an ultimate track car. So let's get right into it. My name is Trent, and you're watching God Next. So starting up here in the front, you'll notice that it's got a way more aggressive feel than the previous 991 generation of the GT3 RS. You've got those sharper racing lines, you got those sharp angles. It looks really sporty. It looks a lot more aggressive in my opinion. But up here, they did the same thing they do with the GT racing cars that you see racing at Daytona and Le Mans. You've got that big center radiator up here, and that pushes air up through these vents, but it also helps cool down the brakes as well. And it pushes up the air through these massive vents right here on the hood. And since you have these vents and everything, you don't have any storage space like you would on a typical 911. But then again, this is a track car, so you don't really want to worry about that luggage space. You got a little bit of storage inside the car, but you're going to be taking this car to the track. You can go for top speed runs, so don't worry about that too much. And speaking of the hood, this car does have a lot of carbon fiber throughout the entire thing, especially the hood where it's fully carbon fiber, and it's got that GT2 RS look to it, where it's part carbon fiber and partially a painted hood as well. It looks really good. It's super lightweight, and I think it pairs really well with these massive vents right here. It gives it that more aggressive look than the 991 as well. But that's pretty much it for the front. Let's move on to the side of this car. Continuing on to the side of this car, you'll notice that it looks very similar to all the previous generations of the 911. And that's because Porsche does that knowing full well that they want their cars to look very similar across all the generations. It's got the same fly line that you've noticed and seen since the 60s. And to be honest, it looks really good. It looks just like a 911 should look. But we're here to talk about some of the differences on this one compared to the previous generations. And first one being that Porsche decided to bring back these colored wheels that you saw on the previous RS versions from like the 70s and stuff back then. But I really think it looks good. You can get these wheels in a couple different colors. I've seen them in red, blue, and green. But these ones are finished in the satin pyro red color, and it looks really good. But speaking about these wheels as well, these wheels are forged lightweight magnesium wheels. And the fronts are 20-inch wheels, and you got 21-inch wheels in the back. A slight offset, you don't really notice it that much, but it looks really sporty. It gives it that more GT car feel. And continue on more to the side of the car, you do have the GT3 RS writing, just like you do on the 991 and all the other previous generations of the GT3 RS. But the red does match the wheels as well, and it looks really good. It's a great design choice in my opinion, and I really like that, slight touch they did to this car. Speaking of the carbon fiber that I was talking about earlier, you do have the mirror housing finished in carbon fiber as well. It's a subtle look, but it looks really sporty as well. And up here, the roof is also carbon fiber. A lot of the carbon fiber is added for a lot of the weight reduction purposes to give this car a higher top speed and just overall make the car weigh a lot less than a typical 911 would. As we move on further towards the back of the car, you'll notice that you'll start to see the big wing you got back here. And from the side, you can actually see that this is a swan neck designed spoiler, meaning that the actual spoiler part is hanging down from the struts right here. Personally, I really like this compared to the previous generations. It looks like a race car. And you will see that it does say Wysock RS right here. It's just because it's got the Wysock package, which adds a lot more features than the typical GT3 RS. But let's move on to the back of this car. Here in the back of the car, this is where I think the most changes happen, and I think this is where it gets the most aggressive. You've got that light bar that continues all the way across the car. It's the same one you see across all the current generations of the 911. It looks really good. It's just a design language they wanted to continue with the GT models as well. The main thing I want to talk about is this wing. This thing is massive. I'm standing right up against the back of it, and it's damn near coming up to my shoulder blades. And this is a small car. Like, it's definitely not big, but to have a spoiler that's that big, it's just insane for a street car like this. Now, one thing I really like about this car, one thing I think is super cool, is that this car does have active aerodynamics on both the front splitters and the spoiler right here. So at a certain speed limit, this little flap right here will adjust depending on just how fast you're going. So it'll give you more downforce, make you more pushed into the ground. I think that's really cool, and it's a lot better for cornering too, especially on the track. And then again, you could also manually adjust this through the center console screen, but we'll talk about that in just a few moments. But I think it's a really good looking wing, and it's just a new feature. I've never seen Porsche do this on any of their current cars, so I think it's a really cool feature. More stuff about back here is right here, you will see that you got these little flaps. So one of these is for oil, one of them is for another fluid. And it's a little bit different than the previous generation, whereas this whole flap back here on the previous 991 GT3 RS the whole thing would come up, making it a lot more accessible. So right here, you just have one right here and one on the other side. It's a little bit different, but it's a sports car. You don't really need full access to stuff like that. Continue on back here, we talked about how the front, you got those big vents, and this is a 911, so this is a rear engine car, meaning that the engine sits behind the rear axles. And this does come with a 4-liter flat 6 engine, and it is naturally aspirated as well. This car does produce 518 horsepower and 342 pound-feet of torque, which is plenty for track days and just daily commuting. Then again, you're not going to be daily commuting in a car like this, most likely. If you do, more power to you. But it's got plenty of power, it's got plenty of torque. It's an all-around great sports car. It's got a 0 to 60 at 3 seconds, which isn't the fastest one out there, but it's definitely fast enough, so you don't really have to worry about getting from point A to point B slow. You're gonna be getting from point A to point B just as fast as, you know, every other sports car out there. But let's move on to the interior of this car. All right, sitting inside this car, I will say it's probably one of the most comfortable supercars I've sat in. And yes, I'm saying a supercar. This is a supercar. It's got the same performance numbers as a lot of these cars out there. But moving on, let's talk about these seats. These seats are super comfortable. You got that leather finish. They really hug you, especially when I'm just driving around the parking lot. Like I said, it's not, you know, I'm not gonna be driving on the street right now, but driving around the parking lot, it's super comfortable. It hugs me as I'm taking these tight little turns. It does say Weistock on the headrest as well, just to let you know you have that extra package that adds a lot more to this car. And in here, I'm also noticing there's a lot of red accents in here. You see it on the steering wheel, you got the red stitching, you got it on the gear selector, the dash, the door panels, even the seat belts are finished in that red, you know, look and feel. It matches the wheels and the side writing on the car. Continuing on, I noticed there's also a lot of carbon fiber in this car. You see it right underneath the display screen. You got carbon fiber around the cup holders and even the door handles. And the door handles actually do have a cutout in the side of them, which is added weight reduction, which is a really smart move. It may not look like a lot, but in the end, it adds up to a ton of weight being lost on this car. Continuing on, we've got a beautiful center display. It looks very similar to, you know, all the other 911s, but this car has all the creature comforts you could want with the performance of a track car. You've got your Apple CarPlay, your Android Auto. You can even control specific parts of the car through the center display. Like I said, you can adjust the spoiler manually through here. I think that's just a really cool feature. You don't see that on a ton of cars. But it's a nice little feature. Control your hazards. You can adjust your, your springs and dampeners. Right here, there's also a toggle switch with the front of the car to help raise the axle of your car in case you're going up those steep driveways you don't want to scrape your car. Overall, the interior of this car looks great. The steering wheel is amazing. It looks like a race car steering wheel. You got 4 different switches on here that allow you to switch between your drive modes, your traction control, and a couple other ones, but it looks really good. Overall, it's just a comfortable car, and I can definitely see myself at least sitting in something like this every day, but not driving on the street every day. Well, there you guys have it. Those are just a few things that make this car so special and so unique. And I definitely think this is one of the best sports cars to come out of the past couple of years. Porsche had a lot to do to one-up the 991 generation, and I definitely think they took a huge leap with this one. It looks great, it feels great. This isn't our personal car, so I don't really get to drive on the streets, but just driving around the lot, I noticed that it drives super smooth. It's a little rough when getting going, but it is a race car basically. It's a street legal race car, so it's not gonna drive like a regular car out there. If you got the money for a car like this and you don't care about that, this is the first car I'm buying when I win the lottery. Personally, this is my dream car, so getting to do a review on this is super cool. But let us know down in the comments below what your guys' dream cars are, what car you guys would like to see us talk about next, and we'll see you guys in the next video.